Good morning. We're going to start off today with working with issues that came up during the pandemic and post-pandemic with our families. I'm Diana Harrington, and this is...
I'm Carol Bayer.
We're both marriage family therapists, and we work with high-conflict families. I'm an evaluator. Carol's an evaluator. Currently, neither one of us are evaluating families, but we are working with the high-conflict families. Okay. During the pandemic, domestic violence increased, and I'm going to have to put my glasses on because I can't see here. And I did a compilation of studies that were done across the country, and they included crime reports, police calls, hospital records, emergency and health line registries, and other administrative reports. The dynamics with domestic violence were really accentuated during the lockdown. People were forced to be together that normally maybe got small breaks, got away from each other. Having children at home and homeschooling them was a huge stress on the majority of parents. And it did increase child abuse also. Financial insecurity was a problem. And these are all things that contribute to domestic violence just without a pandemic. During the pandemic, they were accentuated, and with that, it increased. The real problem, I think, also became that because we were isolated, that people who normally would be able to help or that people felt they could go and talk to, they were isolated from. And isolation in and of itself is a huge part of domestic violence. And so what we were seeing as therapists is people that many times, because we were doing telehealth, were not comfortable talking about what was truly going on in their home, because many times the perpetrator was sitting right next to them, even though we asked that they be separated and so forth. So our services were somewhat impacted because we couldn't really give safety to our clients that they many times need. Carol, do you have anything to say about DV?
You want it now?
Yeah, go for it.
Off the cuff? Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. One of the problems is the over-control, and both with any kind of domestic violence, with child abuse, interpersonal violence, is that the person who's in control seeks to isolate their partner. They seek to make them feel as though they are guilty, that they're wrong, that they owe something to the person in control. And so what I was getting from a lot of kids when CPS reports were being made, because Diana and I do a lot of similar work therapeutically when we're not just talking about high conflict, and so we were probably both seeing many more children that were coming in either with absolute real or what they believed was abuse. And sometimes it turns out to not be, but they would tell me that they were being interviewed by outside services with their parents in the room. They felt that because they were doing their therapy, sometimes court mandated, sometimes not, through telehealth, that their parents were outside the door listening, even if that wasn't true. They didn't know that. So for a person who's a victim of domestic violence who already feels that they've lost their self-esteem, or they don't even feel like they have any self-esteem, it really puts them in great danger. And I understand that probably the numbers went way up. Yeah. And we probably don't even know what all the numbers are at this point, just because people don't come forth and talk about it.
And another problem with domestic violence during this time was where women or males, but primarily women and children, could go to a shelter during non-pandemic times. The shelters were not taking people, so there was really no place for women and children that felt endangered, truly endangered. There was no place for them to go unless they had family. And then again, many families did not feel like they could take other family members in because of the pandemic.
of COVID. Yeah. Yeah.
So it became a problem. And post-pandemically, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of PTSD with some of the children, and with some of the I won't use the term survivors, but some of the victims of domestic violence. Also, there's some hesitancy to get into therapy because there's still a lot of uncertainty about whether there's going to be another lockdown or whatever. So they're just very feeling stuck and unprotected.
May I interject? This is something that I would like to read.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I didn't write it. I wish I had. It was written by a woman named Mary Goyer. I don't know where she practices out of. She's a trauma specialist. And it was written in April of 2020. And it's not terribly long, but I think it's really very valuable. And I've shared it. I have shared this with a lot of my clients, and they really identified. We may be at a better place now because there are more services available, things are more open. I think everyone is fearful that we'll go back to a lockdown, but we don't know that. But this was something that I thought was excellent. So, quote, as a trauma specialist, I've been sharing variations on the same theme over and over again with clients. 1, we're all in a stress response right now, all of us. And when survival stuff is up, certain cognitive functions change. Our capacity to think clearly is a little different. This is the territory of trauma, folks. It's no one's fault. 2, as a result, we can't take in and integrate what we see happening around us. Even if we haven't noticed a challenge with processing, integration, or the pulling of information altogether won't happen until later. Right now, we're just in it. 3, feeling numb is normal. 4, feeling anxious or on high alert is normal. And I'm sure that you've seen that too. Not just in our office. I see it in the community all the time. So feeling anxious or on high alert is normal. Feeling collapsed and depressed is normal. Feeling clingy or impulsive or even paranoid or nonchalant, all normal. Reaching for your addictions is normal. We know it's not healthy, but people do, go to that comfort place. Seeing a range of responses in yourself at different times of the day is also consistent with being in an active stress response. It all depends on your wiring related to stress and or prior traumas. You may even enjoy certain experiences you're having, while other parts of you are overwhelmed. We're complicated beings with many parts sitting side by side. Almost done. Because the trauma is happening still, the goal is to meet yourself and all of your coping mechanisms with compassion. Reach out for support, call a friend, eat an apple, lower your expectations, take a nap, use your power tools, call your therapist, move your body, use meditation, deep breathing, exercise, even if only for a minute, and meet yourself with compassion again and again. And I thought this was wonderful, and I think it's very apropos to what we're all still going through at some level. And I certainly won't get political, but if we add to the pandemic all of the disturbances, no matter what side you're on, that went on last year, that only made people feel that the world was even more safe, and more people were angry. So
it's true. And as this relates into Minors Council, one of the things I would say, and Carol and I can add this into our handouts, is as Minors Council, you are going to be with families when they are in a stress response. Mm-hmm. Because, essentially what we're seeing in families is mom and dad, or mom or dad, depending on the family, is stressed. Children are stressed because they don't have peer interactions, which makes them really difficult to be with 24/7 at home. Mm-hmm. Parents are trying to teach children. Parents are not teachers, and they're not particularly some of them didn't do particularly well. Children did not do well at all with online schooling. There was a few that worked for. That was the very, very small minority, extremely small minority. And so what you may be seeing as Minors Council is when you're out in a family's home interviewing or working with them, you may see them actually in their stress mode. And if you have a few things like helping them learn, like, you know, you're looking really stressed, why don't we, you know, just sit down for a second, take a couple deep breaths, you know, why don't we, you know, do you have some water? Let's get a drink of water. Just something to help teach them how to decompress some. Because, as I said, their services to our families is not what it was at one time.
I want to add something that I found. It was on the internet, and I thought it was pretty adorable. I don't know how old this boy is. His name is Ben. He wrote this. He said, "Home with a D, homed school. It is not going good. My mom's getting stressed out. My mom is really getting confused. We took a break so my mom can figure this stuff out. And I'm telling you, it is not going good." And I just thought it was so adorable, and that's what we're hearing. You know,
Yeah.
Parents are coming in. They're pulling out their hair. They're mad. They say, "My child's falling behind." You know, we try to normalize. All the kids are going to be behind. It's okay. They're going to learn it. Yes. By the time they finish high school, they'll have some basic information. And I had one girl that said to me, "I sort of like homeschooling, and because I can turn off my camera, I can stay in my pajamas all day, and I stay in bed and I just click the thing." I said, "You don't get out of bed?" She said, "No, just to maybe go to the bathroom, maybe to get some food." And that was her day after day. And her parents, you know, you can fight it and fight it and fight it. And I think probably for both of us, you know, I usually say to parents, I'm sure you do too, pick your battles. Yeah, pick your battles. These are unusual times. We've never, in our generation, unless we're over 100 years old, and none of us are yet, we've never gone through anything like this. When we look back in history books, we are going to see, you know, the truth of it, which you know and we know. But it was a tough time. But I loved that. I thought that was very cute. I think it's valid.
It's really cute. It's really true. I had a family that they were twins, and they were a co-parenting family that I was working with. Mom and Dad just really could not get along. Really could not get along. But they could get along well enough to be in my office together, which is better than some of my families.
Absolutely.
You know. And the kids could work with them and all. But both the parents and the dad refused to do the homeschooling. I'm not doing it. So Mom had the whole burden of homeschooling these twins. And the daughter was Miss Goody Two-Shoes. She loved making her teacher happy on screen. She was doing it. The little boy was just a pistol. He was horrible. I mean, and the mom was losing her mind with him, and the dad. And what finally got Mom and Dad to start working together was Mom had to start calling Dad to say, "Come on, I need you to come over. He is out of control. He will not listen to me." So Dad would come over, get the little boy under control, and then school would go back. But that was interesting. That was how this one family actually started functioning, because Mom and they had been in court because Dad had been abusive, which was really interesting. But Dad had done some work, and he was appropriate. Mm-hmm. But when Dad said, "Sit down," everyone in the room sat down, me included. You know, it was just, you know, Dad just had that about him. But this mom, when they started talking about, well, maybe schools, you know, maybe they're going to open up classroom and whatever it is, she was in the office one day, and she goes, "We are camping out overnight. My children will be the first ones through that door." She said, if it's a lottery, she said, "I'm going to win it." She said, "If it's a lineup, I'm going to be at the front." She goes, "They are going to be in that room first." So, and I think that was just kind of the feeling for many parents. Okay, let's move on to substance abuse. Okay, substance abuse is always an issue here in the States. But it became a huge issue during pandemic, during the lockdown. There were 93,000 drug overdoses in 2020. It's the highest number ever recorded, ever. Okay. Now, those were the recorded ones. That's not going to take in the ones for all the people that were homeless, the street people. Those things usually actually are not recorded. So we have a much higher rate than really what our data gives back to us. Mm-hmm. I mean, that just tells you something. So when you, So, and that was like a 30% increase in 1 year from the year before, which is huge. Part of what also happened, and this is really interesting, I have a primarily upper end, high income clientele, primarily. So usually the drugs I'm usually dealing with a lot of alcohol, opioids, and those two basically. Okay, because but during the pandemic, fentanyl became an issue, and that was one of the reasons that there's been so many deaths, because people who will who just recreationally, like, okay, they'll just go down to their local dealer and get some pills or something, were getting drugs laced with fentanyl and overdosing. And it was a true problem. They were overdosing in front of their children because they did not realize. I had 3 families where the father died in front of the children, just died in front of the children.
Talk about trauma for the rest of their life.
Yeah, the trauma was terrible. And that's not usual. I mean, that's not something that all of us as therapists come across every day. So substance abuse and all the things that went with substance abuse, child abuse, domestic violence, neglect,
unemployment.
Well, unemployment was such an issue anyways for everyone. But all those things that go with it that affect a family were intensified by isolation and by the numbers of it. Excuse me. 1 in 10 adults, which is really a pretty high percentage, reported starting or increasing drug use to cope with pandemic stress. Now, as therapists, that was nothing we encouraged.
No. Go home and drink a lot, or go to go to the cannabis shop. Yeah,
yes,
that'll help.
Yeah, that'll help a lot. But cannabis did very well. They did very well during the pandemic. And there was something that I think really was not talked about a lot. We were talked about, high risk for COVID, for diabetes, heart, and all of that. Reality is, people with a past history of drug abuse or current drug use are at high risk for very poor outcomes with COVID. They are not very COVID resistant. I don't think that's a real term, my term.
Probably is.
Yeah, but they are part of the hospitalized population and population that died because they just don't have it. Their bodies don't have the resistance, and they're at greater risk for contracting.
I know firsthand through my husband's work, what he does is that there's been a tremendous increase in people coming in denying the drug use, but having been affected by drug use during this whole period of it's been we're coming into almost 2 full years. But as a way of coping and as a way of just not, being able to function effectively, and they were very much more at risk. And because of the drug use, they are not doing the kinds of things that we would all do to keep us all safe, each other, ourselves. Early on there was a lot of mask resistance. There was certainly a lot of vaccine resistance, and it's personal for everyone. But the people that are at high risk, that are already not very well, that are already using substances, which I'm sure lowers their resistance. Medically, I don't know exactly what it does, but they were in that really probably very high risk category, and many of them didn't make it. And then the families are left trying to sort through. The anger, which is part of grief, but the anger at, well, why did my dad or my mom do this? And so I think when I said earlier to Diana about the trauma of a parent dying in front of their child, just a parent dying, even if it's not in front of the child, when it's not in the developmental stage, it's a middle-aged parent that, maybe was not real healthy and, again, was using substances, and not taking care of themselves. And then they lost that parent, which changes the whole family dynamic. not just because of grief, but financial. The parent who might have been a stay-at-home parent for a while now is forced to go back to work. So it's such a ripple effect. It might seem like sort of nothing, for some people, but it's such a ripple effect that will have lifelong consequences for our families.
Yeah, I think that's an issue because therapeutically, many of our clients, we look at generational things that pass down through generations, or what happens when a family structure changes. Yeah. And we're going to have years and years and years of the effects of this because it's not going to just go away. Just a little bit more on substance abuse. For those who wanted to get help for addiction during this time, they were out of luck because services were very limited. I mean, our recovery centers were closed down for the most part. They did some data surveys on telehealth because they went to trying to use telehealth for recovery, and telehealth did not work well. Telehealth worked,
even for the 12-step programs, we're always referring people to get help where they can, and the meetings were not available. They didn't want to do telehealth because it felt so impersonal, and it's not as anonymous when you do that.
Yeah, so. No, it's not. Yeah, I know. I had one client. They're a really cool couple. They're both in recovery. They both work in recovery, and the online just wasn't working. And they were like, "This is, we're needing this," because they also had 3 kids at home.
Yeah,
so I was up walking my dog one evening up in a local park. And I noticed all these people around, and I'm walking, and I'm not thinking too much of it, but they don't all have dogs, and they're just around. And pretty soon I see my client, he's like, "Hey," and I'm like, "Hi," and he goes, "We're doing our own meetings up here." Do you know? Yeah.
Smart.
The meetings grew so big, though, because there was such a need that the city closed it down.
Oh.
Yeah, they did. They closed it down. They did, because it was drawing such numbers because people needed that kind of support, that and they also, it was funny talking with them. It was like, we need to be outside, and it was just that whole thing. But the city had to close it down because it was a gathering. So okay, moving on to alcohol abuse. Okay, so 54% increase of alcohol purchases were recorded. I just put this in because I thought it was funny. Okay, I'm sorry. But 54% increase of alcohol purchase were recorded in the week ending March 31st, 2021. That is a huge increase.
It's probably all in your closet.
I have, I don't know if you guys know this. Carol and I have this funny way of how Natalie knows this, of how we rate our parents, how difficult our day was, okay? And it's related to alcohol.
And we are talking probably less than most people use, just for the record.
Yeah, just for the record. We don't want everyone to be calling us with the recovery programs. But so
they're going to.
Yeah, they are. So Carol and I rate our families. If we've on the phone together at the end of the day, or we're corresponding, it's like, how was your day? Is it a 1 glass day? Or is it a 2? Or are we just getting the bottle out?
Well, we haven't gone beyond the 2, just for the record. But,
Oh, no, there's been a few
but
where
people
I'm ready.
that drink or use substances aren't always honest either.
Yeah. So we're not saying that we've never, and that's part, I think, what made me laugh when I read that statistic. Even though I'm dealing therapeutically with the bad outcomes of it, I can understand it.
So when a client says, well, I'm probably drinking more than usual, and we say to them, we don't say, yeah, we are too, but we ask them, so do you have any other coping mechanisms? And truly, without trying to be funny, they will often say, not very many. I don't feel comfortable going. Well, and this was also in the middle of last summer and this summer, 117, 18 degree heat here in the desert. Well, it's too hot to go for a walk. They're right. The malls really don't feel safe because I don't know who's there, who's wearing a mask, who's not wearing a mask. In the extent of COVID, I have no activities. I usually go, the yoga class that I go to closed down 1.5 years ago. And then she closed her practice and she's now a nomad, which fabulous for her. But all of those things, so like when I read you that those coping mechanisms, they were gone. There's no yoga, there are very few exercise programs. The gyms were closed. Both of my sons go to the gym all the time for stress release, to look good, to feel healthy. They were closed. They've recently opened, but that's just recent. So yeah, there was an increase in what is quick and makes me feel better, or smoking. How many, again, talking about, and I know you just went through the drugs, but how many cannabis shops opened up? Yeah, in California, it's basically legal. I know it isn't federally, but there's how many, and they're probably busy enough.
Oh, they're doing very well.
That they're really raking in the money because people see it as no big deal. They don't see the leap, and for them, there may not be from marijuana to anything else. They're happy with that, and it helps them cope, and they don't yell at their kids.
Yeah.
We don't recommend it, but
yeah.
You can't stop it either.
No. And interestingly, when you said that, it made me think of something. I had more kids than usual when I'm talking and complain about mom or dad sleeping on the couch and not being able to wake them up during this time. I had more than usual, which says, which then I go down the rabbit hole with them about, was mommy drinking something before, in the coffee cup, or was daddy, and sometimes the kids that are a little bit older, they know exactly what's going on. And others, they're really puzzled. It's like, mom sleeps all the time now, and it's a really abandonment feeling for them.
And it puts them at risk because now they're having to do things for themselves that they normally wouldn't do. But we're not talking about going in and cooking, muffins. They're online, and I don't know if you're going to get to that part, so I don't want to jump too far ahead.
Well, no, you can go ahead. Actually, the next I'll be talking a little bit more, but go ahead, talk a little bit about the online stuff because that was huge.
It's been there. There's social media. I think we all can agree there are a few benefits, but for the most part, I think it's so detrimental. It puts children in danger. They don't know who they're talking to. And when they have their best friends in Ohio or Florida or Connecticut, and they have no idea what this person really looks like, what their age is, what they're going to ask them to do, and they do it because they're vulnerable. And we are seeing, I think, preteens, 10, 11, 12-year-olds coming in and trying to figure out their own identity, their own sexual identity, their own identity in terms of what they believe in general, which is a normal developmental task at that age anyway. And then they're being influenced that I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough, people think I'm fat, people think that this is wrong with me. And so they latch on to anything, and so much of it is the danger of social media. If you have a parent who is passed out on the couch, they're not going to monitor what that kid is doing. And because even if they're not passed out on the couch from some substance, they're not available 24/7 because these kids are staying up all night online. They're not really available to go in and monitor, and they pick their battles. Well, it keeps them busy. It's kind of like when we had little kids, and the worst thing I think that we all did was we let them watch Sesame Street and maybe some cartoons. But that didn't seem to cause any great and Mr. Rogers, but that was wonderful, right? yeah. Mr. Rogers was terrific. But these kids are exposed not only to the isolation, but trying to fit in, and the parents not being either emotionally available, physically available, I hate to say morally available, but they don't step in because they're fighting with them on everything. So they just let it go. So I think it's a huge danger to children's self-esteem, children's emotional well-being. And it would be interesting to see what the attempted suicide rates are. When I say attempted, because I think we have more and more kids, I think you're probably seeing too. Yeah. These are kids that seemingly have a pretty good life. They live in nice homes. They have either one available parent or maybe both, and they're coming in with such depression and sadness. And again, the impact of social media and media telling them that, well, you don't have to live like this anymore, or the shame or whatever they're going through. So it'd be interesting. I don't have any statistics on that, but it would be interesting. I've seen many young kids, probably you have too, that they have a lot of increased suicidal ideation, and it makes us feel very scared for them.
Yeah, I did try to look up suicide rates for this presentation, and I got such drastic differences that I wasn't comfortable presenting numbers because, CDC, Riverside County, National Mental Health, they all had different percentages. So I didn't do that. But what was interesting, and this is a local issue, was the Coachella Valley, not Riverside. Coachella Valley had a higher than average rate of suicides than the rest of the country and the county. We had one of the highest rates of suicide during the pandemic out here.
And this is all ages?
Yeah. There was one, and this is not verifiable, but one of my clients was talking with me, and she's a school administrator, and she said that she was aware of 15 suicides in one semester, which is a
actual
high rate.
Suicides,
actual
completed
suicides.
suicide.
Yeah, they were completed suicides. Yeah. And, I think it talks to what Carol was talking about is when kids spend so much time online, they think they're with friends, but biologically and physiologically, they're missing things. Yeah. And we're not made to be isolated. That our physiology does not work well that way. Our mental health does not work well that way. And so particularly the high risk is middle school because they are
very vulnerable.
They're very vulnerable. They're just starting in with their hormones. Their brain isn't up to adult yet or to mid-adolescence, but their hormones are starting, and they are very much in need of peer support and peer interaction. They had none during the pandemic. And so they use social media for that, but they don't understand that what they're seeing on social media is not real. They do not understand that. They believe that everyone looks like that beautiful 13-year-old influencer, that everyone has a life like hers, and that her life really is like that. She never has to do chores. She never does this. She's always beautiful. And even when you try to talk to them about it, they don't understand. Like, oh no, that, and so they start feeling bad about themselves and their lives. And actually, I have a whole section on it when we're talking about with Carol Adams about post-pandemic implications.
Diana, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
Diana and I share a client.
I was thinking.
Yeah, and he has, I think, a lot of malingering and a lot of made-up medical concerns. But that's and Mom feeds into it. But he does not go to school in person at all. I've encouraged it so strongly. So he has social isolation. He has some depression. He focuses tremendously on anything that is going wrong in his body. And his best friends and his girlfriend, who he's never met face to face. And I find that fascinating, but it's generational. It's not our generation, but it is generational. These kids say, well, I've got this boyfriend and I really, really love him. Or I've got this girlfriend, I really, really love her. Oh, tell me about her. Well, when do you see this person? Oh, I don't. It's all, and I don't ever mock them because that's their world. But this young boy, he gets into all the drama. Well, so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so. They've never met. I said, well, how old is she? Well, she's my age. How do you know that? And so he doesn't really know who he's connected to. He has no local friends, no local social life, will not go to any activity. Mother doesn't push it. And Mom is a capable person.
But Mom's responsible.
Mom's very responsible. So I almost categorize, I said to Diana, I know it's not the exact diagnosis, but Munchausen syndrome by proxy for emotional difficulty. That mom gets something out of her child not being well. She gets a lot of attention, a lot of emotional needs met. But this child His whole world is his best friends, his online friends. He's not doing well in school. He's failing everything. Mom feels helpless to change that. And they're good people. He's very responsive to coming in. He wants to continue. He likes talking. But yet nothing's changing, which is so sad. So.
And when I first got this child, and actually and this complicates everything. I'm the reunification therapist for he and his brother and his father, and we had to do the majority of our early reunification work online because mother would not allow the child out of the home to come into my office with his father. She did not allow the children out of the house. These two kids were the only time, because at some point I called her doctor and I put my foot down. I said, can the kid really not come to my office? And the doctor said, no. I said, he could go to your office. So, I had to put my foot down. But until I did that, during that whole pandemic time, I was the only place that those children stepped foot out of the house. They were in the house.
We're not talking a month or two. We're talking a year and a half.
A year and a half. And they shared that house with their grandmother, their grandfather, their disabled aunt, their mother, her boyfriend. That is the household. And the one teenage boy and one pre-adolescent. And we even had to do, they were online trying to connect with their father. And you know what the connection was with Dad? Online? Games. And,
I'm guessing.
Yeah, games and superheroes, everything that is online stuff. That was the only thing they have a connection with. Yeah. And now they're doing quite well, sort of.
It's all relative.
In person, your dad actually is coming out next weekend, and they're having a visit and stuff. But still, Mom is holding on, and this is the end play on the pandemic, because parents who used the pandemic for their own needs, they're still holding on. So is Dad allowed to take the kids to Knott's Berry Farm? No. Is he allowed to go to the park with them to play baseball? No. Is he allowed to take them to the movies? No. She got a court order for it. I'm not kidding you. She got a judge to say that the early visitation could only take place in grandmother's home. That's it. So now the kids go over, and their dad is like, how am I going to entertain these kids?
So I'm presuming no minors counsel on the case?
No minors counsel. You want it?
Do we see hands being raised?
Yeah. It needs a minors counsel, but for whatever reasons, they chose not to do that. So going right into co-parenting, because I know we probably have to keep track of our time a bit. We're doing okay. Do you want to talk a little bit just about co-parenting?
I laugh because, as Diana said, I think that we're used to, as therapists, we have two major roles. One, as psychotherapists, we work with families, we work with children, couples, individuals. We deal with a range of issues. The difference to me, and I won't go through all the issues, I think we all know, the types of things that bring people to therapy, but to me, the big difference is when someone calls for therapy, they may be hesitant, they may be fearful, they maybe have never gone to therapy before, but they are voluntarily choosing to go to therapy most of the time. And oftentimes they're more motivated to change. For court-related, for co-parenting, and both Diana and I deal with, we've probably recycled a lot of families because some do well. And some of the co-parents, I think that you've seen and I've seen, seem to get through the drama, seem to realize at some point that it's exhausting for the children, and it's exhausting for them. Those oftentimes are not the people that we see for a long period of time. But for the people that are court-related that are high conflict, they generally are not voluntary. They're coming because they're told to do so. They're already not cooperating, or they really wouldn't be in court-recommended co-parenting. They have terrible, from difficult communication to terrible to horrible communication. They believe that they are absolutely right and don't let it go. And I see this, my Bonnie and Clyde, who I'm going to talk to you about in a second. I was going to give them other names, but that felt,
Appropriate.
Most appropriate. They absolutely dig their heels in because they say, I'm right, he's wrong. I'm right, she's wrong. And they will not budge. They will not open their eyes. They will not listen. And I think we all see that. They're very resistant to change because they believe that they're right. When children are resistant to see the other parent, which we both see, some child refusal to be with the other parent, they need support from what's called, we all have taken this course, the favored parent. The parent who is the one who is primarily the good parent, according to the child, needs to be encouraging, and they're not, and especially if they have co-parenting conflict. Children are often pulled into the conflict. I'm sure you see it. How many kids will come in and say, well, my mom is doing this and that. And I say, well, how do you know that? Well, I think so. Well, what makes you think that? Well, my dad doesn't want me to go there. Well, why is that? Because my dad says that. And it could be either parent. It doesn't matter. It's not mom's more or dad's more. It's kind of an equal opportunity. So kids now are being pulled in, which is alienating them to the other parent. And that makes it really, really tough. So I'll tell you about Bonnie and Clyde very quickly. And I'll tell you a couple of good outcomes. So Bonnie and Clyde. I've changed a few things, of course. So mom and dad have one child who's now 3. They married, but the marriage lasted 2 months, which was just long enough to conceive a child, just the one. Dad had prior marriages, and he has children who live with him from those marriages. Mother had not been married before, and she has no other children. Mom believes she is the parent because she is the one who is the mother, and so therefore she should raise the child. I often call it mother ownership. Her belief is, I'm the mother. Of course I'm going to be in charge. And she insults father no matter what I say. I said, these are the rules for today. And I have walked out of the room when they break those rules because it's gotten to a point where it's so chaotic. When mom insults dad, rather than dad saying, you're wrong, or even some common expletives, which often we hear, he gets angry, shuts down, and he says, fine, I just won't go to anything if you are going there. T-ball, children's soccer, little gymnastics, any kind of activity. Dad retreats and says, I'm not going to take him on my week, and they share the child equally. Their communication obviously is terrible. They're highly resistant to make changes. They argue, Diana laughed at this, they argue with me over who is getting the most time. So, tongue-in-cheek, one day, I have a clock that's sort of just across so I can gauge where we are. So the dad said, you are giving her way more time. And I said, I'm actually not. He said, I think you are. You're giving her 5 or 10 more minutes than I'm getting. I said, turn your head and see that clock over there? Oh, I didn't know you had a clock there. I said, I do. And I said, the whole time you're talking, he missed the point. The whole time you're talking, I'm watching the clock. Oh, so I know exactly. You get 10 minutes, she gets 10 minutes. You get 5 minutes for rebuttal, she gets 5. I said, I am giving you exactly the same because I don't pay attention to anything but that clock. Now, they missed the whole point. I thought that it was brilliant, and I was sort of chuckling. And even last night when they came in, and I finally said,
I'm so sorry you had him last night.
Well, it refreshed everything. Yeah. Again, it went with the clock. I went with the clock. He said, you're still giving her more time. She said, well, you let him talk on and on. I said, no, look at the clock. So a good one, though, a nice outcome, a nice outcome for the family. And mom is a stay-at-home mom. Dad works full-time. This has been the children are somewhat young. They're like, 9 and 11, so they're not babies. But mom used the stay-at-home time to dedicate her life to her children. She helped them with schoolwork. They do very well. She helped them adjust to the Zoom classes. They did crafts. And she abided by absolutely, her husband's a doctor. He said, I don't want the children out of the house, which probably was extreme, but, it's not my call. And she did very well, and the children actually came through it in pretty good shape. When the kids went back to school, though, all of a sudden, mom felt lost. She had lost her own identity. I don't believe, based on what she said, that she turned to any substances for support, but she had no real friends that she connected with. She's lived in this area for maybe 3-4 years. So she kind of lost her own self and the contacts. The good thing is she's bright, and we talked about the kids are fine, they're doing well, they're healthy, they're in school, they're being cautious. Now it's time for her to blossom again. The nice thing is she is doing some physical activities. She's engaging with friends. She's a little cautious and hesitant, but that was a really nice outcome. And they didn't come to see me for co-parenting, but they came just for therapy, prior to the pandemic. Some just adjustment issues. But there are some nice ones. One last one, I have an older couple that they made their own lives. They were probably around my age, which is older, in their early 70s. Dad did a lot of outside, the husband did a lot of outside activities, pickleball, tennis, and he was still able to do that during the pandemic. Their kids are all grown and living their own lives. The wife didn't have that, and she has some physical challenges, so she wasn't able to do anything that was very active. And one day she said to her husband, "Have you been happy during the pandemic being here with me?" And he said, "No." And it crushed her. And he said, "I was being honest." And what it brought about was they learned to have their own life prior to the pandemic. And so they weren't together that much. Yes, they shared a bedroom. Yes, they would watch TV together, but that was it. They had very little in common. So they were on the verge of divorce. And they're still together. And now they've actually stopped therapy. But it was sad because would they have made it through without the pandemic? Maybe. We don't know. But the pandemic certainly put a lot of pressure on them. So.
It did. Yeah. I think going back to just co-parenting, once again, the isolation was so detrimental because I think each parent kind of lost contact with their support systems. Mm-hmm. They're not a support system for each other.
Right.
Made it really difficult. But what I really have been dealing with and felt, and I think this is going to be a Minors Council issue, is so many things came up that parents needed to deal with. Are the children going to have a vaccine? Are they not going to have a vaccine? Yeah. Are the children going to go to school? Are they not going to go to school? Are they going to be in activities? Are they going to go to church? Are they not? And these are things that were hard questions for parents working together. And then we get parents who actually use the children, for the most part, to sabotage each other. Right. And the children are in the middle of this. We're trying to get parents to just agree, can the child go back to school? I had parents could not agree. Yeah. One parent was going to keep them home. One parent wanted them to go back, and they had joint legal. This is where we needed Minors Council because they had joint legal. And, I kind of, I don't, and I don't even know how legal this was, but
we won't tell.
I kind of took, many times I said, well, that's something you're going to have a judge decide if you guys can't decide it. But I would throw in that, most often the court looks at when parents can't agree whether it's public school or private school, the court will look at that it will be public school, that they're not going to force a parent to pay for private school if they don't want to. But sometimes the court will say, well, if this parent wants to pay for it all, we'll go with it. But most often it's, if it's public-private, that it's going to be public school. And I said, so, before you go back into court, you may want to think about how you think the judge is going to look at this, about whether the child is going to continue to be out of school when the majority of children are going back to school. And it did give some of them thought, they're like, well, maybe we'll just go back to school like the majority of people. But I did find, and this was mostly mothers, I had one dad, but mostly mothers that did try to use the pandemic as a way to keep the child the entire time.
Oh, yes.
The entire time. And fortunately, I called Carol early in the pandemic because I had a case, and she and I were, it was a case that she was actually not minors counsel, but she was representing one of the parents, but I was working with them. And when the lockdown came out, what was that, the March 19th?
Yes.
The child happened to be March 20, happened to be at mother's house. Okay? Dad got a call. She will be staying with me now the entire time until we're guided by the government, until what time she may now see you. Mother ownership. But, and she was all but dancing around. I mean, I called. I said, "Okay, what's the legal stuff going on here?" And they had just come down. Carol, you said the judge said that the state court said that they had to stay with the parenting plan.
But you know, have you talked to those parents in the last year?
No.
Interestingly, Dad decided to let Mother do all the schooling, so that child was with Mother every day.
Okay. Well, but that probably was not a bad choice. Because Mom was capable and stuff. But
that was their agreement.
That was good. Well, I was like, and actually, they did come a long way. We do have some parents that push comes to shove. But that one just cracked me up. I mean, she always dancing on the table like, oh, she's with me. And I've got the, state telling me she doesn't go anywhere else. But she was not the only one.
No, she was not.
She was not.
And when we say to a parent like that, is this good for your child? They just look at you like you've just grown something strange out of the top of your head.
Yeah, because it's not about the child.
No.
It's not. And that's something I want minors, and I think Minors Council knows this. It's rarely about the child. But just,
are we going to have, at this point, because that's happened, are we going to have a fall out now that there's going to be so much more alienation, and how do you label it, and what do you do about it? It's not easy.
No, it's not. And I think that's an excellent point, is alienate. What I'm seeing is, I'll call it resistance to contact, but the underlying issue is alienation has like tripled during pandemic. The circumstances have just allowed it. Because what I've seen is a parent will take a stance, I'm concerned for your safety, your other parent doesn't care.
Yeah.
Or the other issue is, and actually I have this on some of the handouts, there's huge disagreements over, well, I'd let you go see your dad, but he's got all those other children there. Okay, which for some parents was, I understand that can be a legitimate concern, because those kids that are over at Dad's, his stepchildren, are also going back to their other parent, which then nobody really knows how safe is, how well are they taking precautions or not, or are they being exposed? So it's this huge ripple effect that goes on. But I think there's issues of going to see the other parent, seeing the other parent's grandparents, not seeing any extended family, whether they should or not. Disagreements on how to share a holiday, because one family wanted to be isolated, the other family did not want to, was going to have extended family. Religious issues became huge in my practice. I had so many, I must have had 5 different families that one member was okay with going to religious services during the pandemic if they were outside or whatever. The other parent was not. The fight became about the religion instead of about pandemic issues. The children ended up in the middle of that. That was huge. Vacation time, parents arguing over whether or not it was okay to go on vacation. That was this summer.
On a trip.
That was this summer. That was huge.
Can I jump in real quick, and I'll make it quick? My Bonnie and Clyde family, dad's father had passed away during the pandemic, not from COVID, but his dad had been living and had died in I don't know what part of Texas, and so Clyde wanted to go back and take the child on his time to the memorial service, and mother said absolutely not. He said, but it's my time, and mother absolutely said, you are not taking our child on a plane, and you're not taking our child to Texas because they're not being careful, which, that's not fair. Anyway, I suggested talk to the pediatrician, get the pediatrician's input. They did. Pediatrician put in writing, I believe Dad is capable of caring for this child. Dad wears a mask. He said he will mask his child. He will make sure that he is very, very cautious. He's not a bad dad. He's a terrible co-parent, but he's not a bad dad. Mother went to court on that issue, and the judge said, no, he can take him. And
He can or can't?
he could. He said, I am allowing, I don't know what judge it was, but locally. And she said, and so last night when she was throwing barbs at Dad, and I said to her, because she believes that she always is right and that the court believes that Clyde is always wrong. And I said, but they let him go to Texas. She's, well, that's because the judge is probably from Texas. That was her response. And I just thought, okay, we're not. Pardon me?
Wrong judge.
Yeah, wrong.
Yeah.
Judge Wells is from Texas.
Well, yeah, it wasn't him. And I said, I don't think it really matters. I said, I will tell you that as therapists, and I am quite positive for the judges and for attorneys, they really keep out their personal beliefs. That's inherent in the work that we do, except after hours.
Yeah.
I'll let you finish.
Yeah, and we'll wind up. One of the things that was really interesting, and this will come into Minors Council, is there were a lot of disagreements about child support. Because what happened was one parent would be home. A lot of my families actually did well. If one parent was working from home or unemployed, they would do the homeschooling. My parents did work that out pretty much to an okay degree. I had one couple that's like, no, you do it. No, you do it. Neither one of them wanted to homeschool. But what happened with quite a bit was they would have to adjust the parenting plan so that one parent could do the homeschooling, and then the other parent's like, well, I'm not paying the same amount because I don't have them as much. I'm not, and it went back and forth, and that was something, because as a therapist we don't deal with child support. It's like, you're gonna have to talk to your lawyer, Minors Council, whoever, about that. But that became a real issue with some of my families, and then, but the part that was so kind of sad for me with that, the kids would hear it.
Oh yeah.
The kids would hear, and so I had one little kid say, I guess I'm a paycheck.
Oh my goodness.
And
That's terrible.
he was fun. He's a funny kid, but that's how he heard that. So let's see, are we missing child abuse? Okay, I'm going to go through child abuse just real quickly because I think we have to move on. Okay, in a study in California, and I only did California, okay, from 2019 to 2020, the report numbers fell 24%. Why do you think they fell? Do you have any idea why they fell? Schools were closed.
Less reporting.
Less reporting. Child abuse was up, and reporting was down. And there was a lot of discussion between teachers, and it really has become pretty clear from the pandemic, and this is a lasting, I won't say effect, but a lasting lesson, that really the gatekeepers for our children's safety is the teachers. Right. Because they are the ones that see the kids, that pick up the differences, that will make the reports. And when they were isolated from the kids, I had teachers that were my clients say to me, I think I'm worried about one of my kids. I don't think they're okay, but I can't tell because I'm only online, and I don't think they can say anything because, there's like 5 other kids in the family and mom's right there. But she said, if I could get that kid, and see them, I would know. But she said, I can't make a report even though I think there's something wrong. And I think that is a lesson or something for us all to know, that we do need to be in touch with teachers if we're concerned about abuse issues, because I think they are good gatekeepers.
Well,
for
and the
children.
kids weren't in after-school programs. They weren't in the Boys and Girls Club. They weren't coming in, a lot of them, face-to-face therapy. I was open the whole time with a lot of precautions in place, and I think that you were too.
I was too. Yeah.
And yet, we didn't get to see the kids all the time. Or if we were doing Zoom, they have somebody right outside their door, or they feel that they do. They're not going to say, well, my mom or my dad, grabbed me and they pushed me down because they were really upset, and they're not going to talk about it. So I can see where the reporting went way down. We didn't have, there was just not access to the kids.
Yeah. So with that, unless we have any questions, we'll conclude our
Just want
part.
to have one statement question, I guess. I think you both know this case, and I'm not mentioning any names whatsoever, but I have a case where I have a girl, she's now in high school. I think I've been minors counsel 3 years, and she stayed home during the pandemic, got all Fs. And she was in to see me recently, and this poor kid, she always looks depressed. Always, 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 always. And, I said, I've suggested everything. I've suggested tutors, I've suggested all kinds of stuff. She's doing homeschool because she doesn't have any friends at school, and she really doesn't want to go back to school. I think
That's
she's always felt
that's
like
our
she's
kid.
not-
Yeah.
Yeah.
not popular, not liked,
Yeah.
doesn't have any friends.
Right.
So I said to her, how would you feel about trying to get into GED classes? First good expression I've ever seen on that kid's face in a year and a half.
Wow. That's
That was
a great.
that was smart.
Okay.
I would like that because I'd like to do that and get a job.
Mm-hmm.
Because she has not been out of her house like for a year and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can say for Minors Council, I would encourage all of you, when you're picking up cases, particularly at this time, get a history of what pandemic family life was. Get a history. Were these kids that their parents allowed them to see some friends safely, or they did, they made sure they had FaceTime, or are these kids like the one that we share, totally, in lockdown at home, or like that girl who had not. There's many children who are not going back to school, unfortunately, and they they weren't functioning real well before. They're non-functioning now, and I don't know. I think we're going to have follow-up studies that tell us that these children will not go back to functioning.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I'm not just talking about me. I think it's really important for Minors Council to be involved when one parent is really complaining that the other parent isn't doing a good job, because Minors Council can get to know the personality of the child.
Yes.
And it's not always one parent not doing a good job. It's sometimes the kid, is not a bad kid at all, but just has a personality that doesn't do well in school, or doesn't,
Definitely.
they have their special needs and their wants.
Right.
And it's one of the things I find really rewarding as being Minors Counsel, because I really work hard to get to know my kids.
Yeah, that's great.
I just think it's really important. Even mediators, I'm not complaining, but I think even when people go to mediation and they both complain, and you look at the child's grades and say, yeah, dad's not doing a good job, we better switch custody to mom. I think it's really good that anybody can recommend Minors Counsel, or anybody can recommend an evaluation if parents can afford it, because I think in a lot of those cases, it's important to have a third party,
Yes.
look at the child rather than what mom and dad are grumping about.
I'll make it very quick. I have a reunification case that I'm working with, and the issue was there's a 15-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl, and they were living. It was 50-50. During COVID, Dad got terribly ill. The 15-year-old got COVID, but he got through it much better. He wasn't as sick. And there was one night where the soccer coach called the boy and said, I need your parents to come and bring me a check, or we can't go forward when things open up. Dad said he thought he was dying. He didn't go to the hospital. He said he had never been so sick in his life. And the son was with him. The daughter, I think was back with Mom. And the son didn't stop asking Dad, you have to take me, you have to take me. And the way Dad portrayed it is that the son was unrelenting. And the father finally, he screamed at him, he used some expletives, and he said, then you get out of my effing house. And the boy did. He went back with Mom, and Mom is using that against him. So yesterday we talked about, do you think you had a part in that too? What will it take? Because Dad was there. What's it going to take for you to forgive your dad? He was so ill. I said, have you ever been so sick that if anybody even asked you something, you would say, just get out of my face? He said, yeah. So they started to connect. Now, it was no great magic, but very typical. And the boy they sent in a check by mail, and he's on the team. And that was, they both were frustrated. But Mom used that to hold the children. They're not going back because Dad's abusive. Had he ever been abusive before? Son said no. Has he ever hit you? I think he spanked me when I was 3. Does he feed you? Yes. Is he mean to you? No. So Mom just jumped on the bandwagon, which is something that we see.
We see that all the time. Yeah. And to your point, Carol, it's something, and I mean, we talk a little bit about it when we're working together, is I think it's really important to understand that the children can be the protagonist themselves
Sure.
in these, because that's basically overlooked an awful lot. That many times the child, I mean, I have had children that it is really good for them that they didn't grow up in my home because it would not be they would not be happy. I mean, I have had children
who run the show
are so devious, so disrespectful physically as well as verbally, and the other parent will and a parent will react. And when I say to a child, what are you expecting? When you tell your father to F off, what are you expecting him to do?
Well, it doesn't happen at my mom's.
Exactly, and that's the end. Yeah, Mom would never get mad.
Mom's, or it's not always the mom that's the princess, but more often than not.
Yeah,
that's one of the first things I talk to parents about when this is going on. Do you know what manipulation is?
Yes.
And I mean, I always get there with parents because they're really naive.
They are.
I also stress, because they think when you're saying that you're being negative about their child. Yeah. And I always try to explain that doesn't make your child bad at all. It's a natural reaction to maneuvering conflict.
Yeah.
You might not even be aware of it.
Right.
You're just doing
it
and
you
don't even realize. And I always say that, I'm not condemning you because I don't believe you're aware that yesterday you're telling your child that her dad tried to kill you 11 years ago wouldn't make any difference in this child's life. And of course the dad's a whole different person than he was, and it's a whole different thing, but it's really affected that child.
Well,
You're scared to death to see your father.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we will. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're done.